Okay, everyone. Todd asked me to present on open source texts. It was like, there were many things I could have chosen from. I don't know if this is that exciting after following Jason's. It's very cool. But yeah, so I called this Adventures in Flatworld because Flatworld knowledge is what I'm using. It's an open source site, which you'll see in a moment. And what I'm going to talk about, the backstory, why I explored this. I think Todd probably had a lot to do with it. Also, Rebecca Chavez, she was mentioning that there were a number of people in the business department that had been exploring open source texts. I'll tell you what it is, the pros and cons, which is the adventure part of it. Why incorporate open source? What's in it for you? I think I got that acronym right. And then other open source options. And finally, I think we'll have time for questions. I will go through this quickly, so we will. All right, so a trip down memory lane. I was thinking back in the day, and I'm really dating myself, but when I would register for classes as an undergrad, it was a very simple process. You went to registration, you got your list of books, you went to the campus bookstore, you looked at your receipt, and it was like, oh my gosh, the textbooks are so expensive. Go back to the dorm, and you'd have that lingering question, why are books so expensive? And what were the two main book options back then? New and used. That was basically all you had. So I would sing the David Bowie song, Cha-Cha-Cha Changes. I was thinking of that, again, dating myself, when I thought of the slide. But there have been so many things that have changed even since I first started teaching. The funny thing that started happening is that, you know, I would have my books in the bookstore, and people would just go to the bookstore, buy the books. But I noticed after I guess a couple years of teaching, people wanted to know, what's the ISBN? I would get all these emails prior to the semester starting, students wanting the ISBN, and then I'd get the, can we use an earlier edition because I found it a lot cheaper online, and you've probably gone through that as well. So students were looking for cheaper options, searching on half.com, so many websites they were telling me about where they could get cheaper sources or books that would hopefully work in the class. The other thing that I was discovering is I didn't really know how much my books were because the book reps don't tell you. And so I would go ahead and order this book that I thought was great and all tricked out, and then my students would say, it's over $100, and do we need the DVD, and do we need the access code? And I was like, you're kidding me. And I thought of back in the day when I was a student and how much things were for me. So it was really out of compassion that I started looking for other options. So there were more changes. I began hearing about open source material. It was first through Rebecca Chavez, and I noticed that I actually taught across from a classroom one time in which a business instructor was using open source material. He was using a website, and I wasn't that sure if it would work for me. I wasn't convinced. But I kept looking. I did some preliminary searches online to see what was out there. There really wasn't anything early on in the social sciences. I'd see lectures. Boston University was putting their lectures online. You've probably seen that before. TED Talks, more and more content on YouTube. But really no books that would really work for me. Maybe websites, but I just kept my eye out for that. And then finally, Flatworld knowledge arrived on the scene. I don't know if you've ever explored Flatworld. All right, I'll tell you, and then we'll get to the website. But what I started discovering, first they offered the 101s. They had Psych 101 and Social 101 online. And then this semester they added social psychology. And the cool thing about Flatworld, which I'll show you in a moment, is that students, I'm all about flexibility. I really like giving people options. And you could either access the material online chapter by chapter, so you'd pay a fee and download a PDF, or you could read it online for free, or you could, if you're really old school, wanted that hard copy text, you could order the text. So there it is. And you'll notice they keep adding books all the time. They have, does anyone have a vested interest in clicking on a category? You want to see anything? Okay. Oh, sorry, I went wrong one. Professional and applied. Okay, let's, can I back up on this?
The bullet right near the top of the screen, right next to your video, or
okay.
backwards and forwards arrow. Above, straight up, right next to the www.flatworld.knowledge.
I might try another way. I'll go to the catalog, okay? So here we are, science. And it's cool. I mean, they don't have any in biology, unfortunately. They keep adding, but they've got chemistry, they have geosciences. I have no idea what that is. But you can look at their material, and as an instructor, you can look and see if it would work for you. And then what you do is adopt it, and I'll tell you what I did initially. I kept the old I kept my old standard textbook. Earlier edition is fine when I first started piloting this because I wasn't sure how it would work. So biology, nothing. They only have 4 topics right now. So they have organic chemistry, general chemistry, and geographic information systems, intro chemistry. Let's take a look at another one, another catalog. So you see they're just getting going. But I think like there are 65 books in business and econ. So if you're a business or econ instructor, this might be a great source to check out. You notice they've got accounting. If you're nursing, probably nothing quite yet. But business law, they have all these things. 6 marketing books, it's amazing. Now, they don't have books for everything that I'm interested in, but I thought it was worth a shot because, again, I was responding to what my students were telling me about books are so expensive, and can we use the earlier editions, and why is it so much? And then I also noticed that they were looking online anyway. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. Do you ever wonder if they're really buying the textbooks? When you don't know sometimes because there's so much material online. So I thought, you know, you have no excuses. If it's free and you can access it, it shouldn't be a problem. So that's Flatworld. Do you want to look at anything else? I've just been chatting away. You can click on educators, explore the catalog, create an account, which is really easy, just your login.
Did you modify your textbook?
I didn't this time around. But I'll show you mine. Now, well, let me go back to the present. It's free.
If they click on something, do they have to prove they're a student or anything? Anybody can go in here?
You create an account,
okay.
And they might ask for verification. Like for me, they wanted my yc.edu email. So I'm pretty sure that's how they verify. But right away, my students were able to access the book for free. Now, I'll tell you, I did have a few challenges, and this is the first semester that I ever went back to, or I went full on Flatworld. I didn't have a backup text. So I'm going to just do back to my PowerPoint. Okay. This one?
Yep. No,
this one?
That one.
Okay. So my grand experiment was when I began experimenting with the open source texts a year ago, spring 2011. It was optional, and as I mentioned, I said you can use this book or try the free book. And I wanted to see how many would do it. And I didn't have, I'd say about, out of a class of 30, I probably had 10 try it, and I had probably 5 who loved it. And they had no trouble. What I learned is that they had fast internet connections, and they were flexible in terms of their time frame. I'm continuing it this semester, and as I mentioned, it's the first time I'm using Flatworld as the primary text, only text for my social psychology class. My book was changing editions, changing publishers, and I thought, you know, I'll go ahead and adopt this. It was kind of the mad dash to see if it would be done in time for the semester, just barely, but we've been working it. Yeah.
So you're saying the students had fast internet connection. Are you saying that they don't download the entire textbook, they download just portions of it, and they don't get to keep it? They're just literally reading it while they're looking at it? I mean, you can't really save it?
Well, your question was about accessibility, and I'll tell you there are a couple of options. It's actually very inexpensive to download it to a PDF, and then you would have it forever.
Okay.
But if you want to read it online, it's like reading anything online. You read it and it's gone. And so what I discovered is that there were some issues with students sometimes trying to, I tell them, don't wait until the last minute to access the text. If the deadline for the unit is Sunday night, don't be on it 11 o'clock on Sunday, trying to read all 3 chapters for the first time. And of course, people did that, and then they would complain because the server was sometimes slow. So many of them decided to just go ahead and buy the hard copy or download the chapters ahead of time. So it wasn't entirely free for everyone. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like. Here we go. This should work. There. So one of the really cool things about this is that you can actually embed videos in your text. And there are links. What I used to spend a lot of time in my classroom embedding and saying, here, let's go to the video and let's go to the link. They can click on it right as they're reading. And they're just wonderful examples. So I find it's very, very interactive. And it does inspire students to look up a lot on their own. So this is a little bit on the history. This is the Zimbardo prison study. You probably are familiar with this if you took Social 101 and Psych 101. I uploaded it to the server, I play it in my classes, and they already have seen it, you know. So that was one really cool thing about using this text. So that was embedded in the text, which I think is awesome for an online text. Obviously, I didn't do it.
That's much better than the chemistry one.
Yeah, so they, all of them have been this way where they embed YouTube videos. Now, obviously, if the video is taken down, you're going to have some issues. But I trust that Flatworld has enough people on top of their game that they're going to find an alternative source to redirect you, but if they're reading it online. So anyway, I just thought this was a really cool feature. And it's, like I said, pretty interactive. They'll have links to, this is probably not the best example, but I wanted to show you the video. That's what the text looks like if you're reading it online. And again, I have this as a PDF. So whether you download it or you have it as an online reader, this is what it looks like. That's what I do. Okay. All right. And then back to this one. Okay.
As an instructor, are you limited to how many you can download and use?
No. No. They want an idea of how many students are going to be in my class. But as long as they register and their address is verified, like I tell them that they're going to be at Yavapai College, I have to designate my class. I give them the ISBN, but no one has had any trouble in my class being able to access it.
So then the students have to go to that site and register?
Yep. Yeah, they do. But it's not, they don't have to answer a lot of questions. They're just registering with their Scholar email, YC Scholar email. Now the pros and cons, the adventures. For the adventuring students, venturesome, venturer students, I've had rave reviews about the availability of a free text because so many, like I said, were telling me how expensive my textbooks were. Those accessing the online or PDF versions love the enhanced content like I just showed you, and they love the flexibility. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had to bring the text with me when I'm working on PowerPoints, and I love it too, where I can have the text. This is available for any student who downloads it. You can just have it on your laptop and take it wherever you go or on a flash drive. So that's terrific. It's way better than a big old textbook. Now, the cons, I have to admit, occasional whining. There were people who, especially early in the semester, I don't know if you experience this, Jason, but when you try something new, it's like, I don't know how to do it, and it's not working. You get a few people, and unfortunately, you get one or two actives that are whining constantly and posting on the Ask Carly discussion board, and it's just a little bit tiresome, but eventually they calm down, they figure out how to access it, and there aren't any problems. So that kind of goes with the territory whenever you're trying something new. My solutions, of course, send people to the help desk sometimes for accessibility, but they would complain to me that the server was slow. Sorry, I don't work for Flatworld, but try again. Try at an off-peak time. Again, don't be trying to access it at 11 o'clock when your deadline's at midnight. So free online access, and I told them, of course, if they're on campus, they'll be able to access it, even during peak times, because they won't have that internet connection issue. So I did discover, I've never had any trouble, but as soon as I could, of course, I downloaded all of the chapters as a PDF. But for those who are really trying to read it online, I think reading at 3 a.m. is probably a good idea for some of them when it's a really busy time, and that's the difficulty. So what's in it for you? Why would you adopt it? Well, again, the compassion angle. It saves your students a lot of money if they're willing to do this. They also can share content with friends and family. I've had so many students, maybe this doesn't happen in your fields as much, where they want to show the math problem to their friends and family, but sometimes the videos I play in class, I have students who want to see, oh, have you ever heard of this Zimbardo prison study, or whatever it is. They can play that for their friends and family. They can also share content if they've learned something new and they want to explain. They don't quite have it right, so they can access this material and share it with friends and family. They're more likely to keep the text and For me, it's really about, I want them to remember something about the class. And so I really love it when people tell me, I saved the text, I didn't turn it in. It's much more, they're much more likely to do that when they have a PDF, of course. It doesn't take up any space. And they have more meaningful takeaways. I can't tell you the number of times, maybe you've had this experience where someone finds out what you do and they'll say, well, I took a psych class once, and then they just say Freud back at you, like that's all they remember. They don't have anything meaningful to take away. So I want them, even if they didn't quite get it the first time, to have something that they can refer to, especially in social psychology, when we're talking about things like elections and why people vote the way that they do. Maybe if they didn't quite get it right the first time, they can look at the text and ponder it a little bit more, watch some videos, and understand. So it is a lot of work, I have to admit. The one negative, potentially, is it's work intensive. The supplemental material is slower in coming. But if you've been teaching a while, you have a backlog. It's not a big deal. You're on your own. This probably is the case with PowerPoints anyway. I never like what the publisher provides, so I always write my own PowerPoints. But if you're not used to doing that, it can be time intensive, especially with the book that was barely done at the beginning of the semester. It's been very time consuming to get it together, but I think really well worth it. Now at this point in the semester, I think students really appreciate it and like the content a lot. If you're doing the trial run like I did the experiment, it does require some flexibility to teach from 2 texts at the same time and tailor your lectures in that way. For a flipped class, I understand Larry's talking about that a little bit later, you have to spend the first semester recording. So for my social psychology class, I've got to record the lectures before we can flip it, obviously, and expect them to watch them and know the material prior to class. So that's one of the downsides to it. But again, it's just part of the, I think, part of the learning curve and getting things going for later semesters. Like I said, I think it's well worth it because if we're really focused on, if we're really student-focused, as we say we are at a community college, I think it's really important to demonstrate that and to listen to their concerns. I would have loved it back in the day when I was spending so much on textbooks if I'd had another option. The other thing that I think really makes it worth it is because younger students are so accustomed to looking for things online. You've probably noticed this with the great resources that they share with you. They're already searching online for material. It's almost like it's a natural progression we're moving toward, where they'll expect to be able to access the text, or maybe they're already accessing other versions of the text online. So why not begin the transition now? You can continue to build on your online content and tailor the books, as you were asking earlier. I went with the standard, but you can add to it and make it your own text, which is awesome. I keep wanting to hit page down. So other options, you can write your own text. I did that for my communication class. That is time consuming. You have a hard copy and it's dated and you're unhappy with it. If you're like me and as soon as you finish the dissertation, I hate it. You know, you wouldn't do it the same. But it's great if you have more things to add than is available in your textbook, and that's why I wrote my book for interpersonal communication, because in communication, they would talk a lot about psych theories and soc theories, but not quite get it right. And so I felt compelled in class, you remember this from Psych 101 or Soc 101? I felt compelled to add to it, which is why I did that. But one of my considerations now, my publisher, I've got my contract for 3 years, and now it's time, I think in the fall, where I can make a decision whether I publish another edition or try something else. And I might actually provide my text online for my students free. I guess I already did the work, so that's one of the things I'm looking at. And I did attend a presentation a few years ago in which an instructor had done that. And he embedded videos, like interviews with his students of what they learned in the class right in the text. So you could do it as well if you wanted to. You can also supplement lectures with online content if you're not ready to adopt full-on and an open source text. That's so easy to do. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing that. Using YouTube and TED Talks and all of that, podcasts. And you can I've got many things uploaded to the streaming server, so you can do that as well. My quick search I just did this morning, looking at all the books that are available online. There's Wikibooks, there's archive.org, and what's really cool is they have texts in all these different languages. So there's so many. You pick English, obviously, unless you want Spanish text. But there are books in every language imaginable, which is amazing. And then the consortium.org. Todd, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say there's a number of sites that have online content, and some are just kind of coming to fruition, but they're big, beautiful texts that if you just type in OER in Google, you're going to see a lot of amazing content.
So my closing pitch, try it, first semester, with the previous text as a backup if you're interested in going this route. Just see what happens. I think it's worth exploring at least. So my questions for you, what would it take for you to adopt open source? Maybe have an assistant, TA, to get it all together. I'm just kidding. Todd?
I would just like to say that Maricopa, again, some of the people down there, particularly at, I think it's Scottsdale Community College, their entire math department went OER. So it wasn't just one rogue teacher out there doing something. They had enough combined interest in it to basically say our textbooks are going to be under $20 or whatever. And that was the vision, that was the mission. Whole states, Washington State, have basically said to textbook companies, either you provide us a textbook for $20 or $30, or we're looking somewhere else. And the power, you can leverage the power of the institution, but frequently, we need that vision to come kind of from not only the faculty groups, but from the top as well, to orchestrate those type of events.
Yes. Carly, do you know if it's a guaranteed thing that the books stay up there for, are they constantly updating editions like they do with a regular text?
Well, I haven't had updated editions yet. Now, you have the power to update your own edition and publish your own book, but I was looking at my ISBNs, and for Social 101, it's the same ISBN since I started. So I haven't had that yet where they've updated the edition. But what happens? No. And what they do is you'll readopt the book, and it will give you, it'll ask you for the start date of the class and the end date of the class. So of course, if a student is accessing it online and they didn't download it, conceivably, when the semester's over, they can't go back and read it for free.
One thing I found,
One or two questions.
one thing I found when I used it about a year ago, and they rushed it into production, and the homework key was really terrible. There's lots of mistakes in it. But that depends on how long it's been out there. They were trying to get this book out, and there's just a lot of mistakes in the key, but the rest of the book was, my students found it easy to use, etc. It was just great.
Great. Yeah, I don't have a test bank, so I've had to use previous text banks for my content. Yes?
Carly, is Flatworld the only website?
Oh no, we have a number. You might have missed my slide. There are a couple, if you just do a search online, you can find a number that would work for your class. I chose Flatworld because it was the first one I found that had social science textbooks. Yeah.
I have a question about what sort of delivery do you use? Do you have hybrid classes and?
Yes, right. I do, let's see, for the two that I'm using at this semester, they're both hybrid online optional. And as I told you, I'm big on offering students options. So I record my lectures, and they can, for the students who are taking the class, and it's social psychology, I'm using the book for the first time, I'm recording the lectures so they watch them as I go. Now for my Social 101, it's a flipped class. So we actually flipped it at midterm. And so what they do is watch the pre-recorded lectures because I've already recorded them for this class. And then when they come to class, it's a discussion-based class, or I have them bring something in that's related. Yeah.
Carly, you said can you edit the textbooks that are there or just add to them?
Yes, Chris, you can edit the textbook. So anything you want to add, I mean, If I had a teaching assistant, I would embed a lot of video clips and readopt my books. I have 6 preps, so it's hard to keep track and do it for everyone. But I would love to be able to do that, and you could certainly do that, Chris.
Some of the newer texts you cannot modify.
Ah.
It takes a period of time.
Okay. Yeah, with Flatworld, you can adopt or you can tailor the content. I'm sorry.
Not on all texts, though.
Yes.
Was
Okay.
that you kept saying you could make your own book, but, so you're saying you see a book there, you adopt it, and then you can alter it and give it your own name.
Right. Actually, what you would do is review it, and then add your own content as you go, and then adopt your own version of the text. So you make it your own textbook. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. You want to allow for some time. So if you're planning to do this in the fall, it would be a good summer project. And then adopt your own at the end. So you'd have a review copy to start.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.